Unfortunately, the recent report from the IPC doesn't pass the test on either. One of the report's key authors has a lengthy record of bias against Israel, including openly justifying the Houthis' terrorist attacks on Israeli civilian targets.
There are those who shield Israel and try to silence this council into inaction. What else is complicity? In fact, impunity has become Israel's shield, and this council's silence its enabler.
I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Deputy Special Coordinator Alak Barav, Deputy Emergency Relief Coordinator Masuya, and Ms. Ashing for your briefings. And thank you, Ilana Grudzuski, for your testimony today and your courage. It reminds us how this war began and why it persists. It is also a reminder that this Council and the United Nations as a whole have failed in their mission. They would do well to listen to voices like yours and learn from what you have been going through. Colleagues, the path to a better future in the Middle East is clear. It starts with freeing Matan and all 50 hostages who remain in captivity nearly 2 years after October 7th, 2023. It means ensuring that Hamas, a barbaric terrorist organization, never controls Gaza again, nor poses a security threat to Israel. The United States continues to work tirelessly to accomplish all those objectives while supporting humanitarian assistance to innocent people in need. We cannot expect peace as long as Hamas is a ruling force in Gaza that is threatening or attacking Israel. It is no coincidence that talks with Hamas fell apart after several countries, including members of this Council, announced their intention to effectively reward Hamas for the massacre by recognizing a Palestinian state, all while hostages are still being held in subhuman conditions. Hamas officials have even said that unilateral recognition is one of the fruits of October 7th. The United States continues to focus on the real and important tasks at hand, not conferences, but serious diplomatic efforts and providing humanitarian assistance in a war zone where a terrorist organization uses aid as the basis for its terrorist machine. Mr. President, we all recognize that hunger is a real issue in Gaza and that there are significant humanitarian needs which must be met. Addressing those needs is a priority for the United States. However, we can only solve problems with credibility and integrity. Unfortunately, the recent report from the IPC doesn't pass the test on either. One of the report's key authors has a lengthy record of bias against Israel, including openly justifying the Houthis' terrorist attacks on Israeli civilian targets. By his own measure, he ought to have recused himself. This helps explain why the normal standards were changed for this declaration, raising significant questions. We can spend no shortage of time pontificating and lecturing, but we are here to solve real problems affecting real people, and the only way to do that is with credibility and integrity. Colleagues, President Trump wants to alleviate the suffering the people in Gaza are experiencing at the hands of Hamas and has prioritized getting aid to people in need while implementing safeguards to prevent Hamas from looting. As of August 26th, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has delivered more than 140 million meals directly to civilians in Gaza, 1.5 million meals just today. UN data on the UN's own deliveries tells a different story. Between May 19th and August 25th of this year, over 85% of trucks and 62,000 pallets of aid were intercepted in transit in Gaza. The hard truth is that the international community has poured hundreds of billions of dollars into Gaza over the years, while turning a blind eye to the fact that it was subsidizing and facilitating Hamas's creation of a terrorist stronghold. Colleagues, we will also take this occasion to reject the falsehood that there is a policy of starvation in Gaza. Since the beginning of the war in Gaza, Israel has enabled an unprecedented amount of more than 2 million tons of aid to flow into the Gaza Strip. We are working closely with the government of Israel to increase the flow of aid without benefiting Hamas and are seeing tangible results. Instead of echoing false narratives which only embolden Hamas, prolong the war, and hurt civilians in Gaza, we urge the UN and the rest of this Council to join us in working constructively to deliver aid to civilians that doesn't benefit Hamas. Rather than accept mass diversion of aid as a fait accompli, the United Nations, Council members, and IPC partners should support other mechanisms, including the GHF. We have also seen the Jordan corridor and the facilitation of commercial deliveries of food and other supplies into Gaza, and airdrops by Jordan, the UAE, and other international partners. The United States stands prepared to contribute toward real efforts that will supply life-saving aid to people on the ground in Gaza. Mr. President, we share the same dedication to the hostages underground, starved in tunnels, suffering through Hamas's captivity. Hamas must immediately free all remaining 50 hostages, living and deceased. The reality is that this war could end today if Hamas freed all the hostages and surrendered. We urge the UN Security Council and all members to play a constructive role, call for the immediate release of remaining hostages, hold Hamas to account, and demand it disarm and leave Gaza. Mr. President, we understand that Israel has expressed deep regret for harm to civilians and has already released findings from its investigation into the strikes on Nasser Hospital. The IDF concluded 6 Hamas members, one of whom had participated in the October 7th attacks, were killed when the IDF struck the site Hamas was using to monitor troops at the hospital. We note the prompt nature of this investigation and response and call on this Council to condemn the continued use of civilian infrastructure by Hamas. We also acknowledge a stable West Bank keeps Israel secure and is in line with this administration's goal to achieve peace in the region. Finally, Mr. President, the United States welcomes the government of Lebanon's decision to task the Lebanese armed forces with a plan to bring all weapons under state control by the end of the year. This historic step shows the Trump administration continues to work toward peace and stability with our partners in the region. The Lebanese armed forces now must act to fully implement the government's decision. The United States will do its part to help forge a new reality in the Middle East alongside Israel and our partners. The Middle East can still be a region of opportunity, innovation, prosperity, and peace. We cannot miss this historic opportunity. Thank you.
I now give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank Deputy Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator, Mr. Ramiz Al-Akbarov, and Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Deputy Emergency Relief Coordinator, Ms. Joyce Masuya, for their comprehensive briefings. We are also grateful to Ms. Inger Esching, CEO of the Save the Children International, for her sobering briefing. Indeed, it was moving. The predicament of the Palestinian children under occupation. But the question is, will it move this House? Indecision is complicity, as she rightly reminded us. We also listened with deep empathy to Ms. Ilana Grzyski. We sincerely hope for the safe and swift reunification of her family and all of those still in captivity. And we wish the same for those thousands of Palestinians illegally detained and mistreated by the Israeli occupation for prolonged periods. Healing there must be for everyone. Healing that corresponds to the human suffering of all. Healing that would eventually close and cure the wounds inflicted by decades of occupation. Healing for which there can be no better dressing than justice and international law. Healing that can start now with a ceasefire. Yet, we are in an endless war imposed by the occupier. Mr. President, it has now been 691 days of unrelenting tragedy in Gaza. During this period, Israel has trampled every principle of international law and international humanitarian law with utter impunity. More than 62,000 Palestinians have been killed, among them over 19,000 children, 10,000 women, and at least over 270 journalists and over 360 UN aid workers. Civilian life has been deliberately and systematically dismantled. Even Israel's own military data, as reported in the international media, admits that 83% of those killed are civilians. How can this ever be justified or defended? This cannot be collateral damage. It is mass carnage. Today, no place in Gaza is safe. Yet the indiscriminate military onslaught continues because Israel is confronted with no real consequences for its actions. Hospitals, schools, homes, nothing has been spared. The world is now witnessing live-streamed killing of journalists and rescue workers. The strikes on the Nasser medical complex were appalling and condemnable, yes, but yet they are tragically familiar, part of a grim pattern. There are those who shield Israel and try to silence this council into inaction. What else is complicity? In fact, impunity has become Israel's shield and this council's silence its enabler. The occupying powers' apologists must introspect and objectively assess the consequences of their policies. Mr. President, as if bombs were not enough, hunger is now a weapon of mass destruction. The latest IPC analysis confirms famine is now present in Gaza City, threatening over 500,000 people. The use of starvation of civilians as method of warfare may constitute a war crime. Undersecretary General Tom Fletcher rightly observed. And those are strong words. They need to be repeated in this council. And I quote, "It is a famine we could have prevented if we had been allowed. Yet, food stacks up at borders because of systematic obstruction by Israel. It is a famine in 2025, a 21st century famine. Mr. President, it is not by negating or criticizing and pressurizing the United Nations and its senior officials, or by denying and rejecting the findings of the ICJ and of global human rights and humanitarian organizations, or by silencing the media that we can move forward. It is only by accepting the reality that we can build peace. Pakistan condemns Israel's so-called military operation and planned full occupation of Gaza City, which is nothing but a blueprint for further humanitarian catastrophe, threatening to displace once more up to 1 million people. Simultaneously, annexation in the West Bank and East Jerusalem continues unabated. The E1 settlement plan is a deliberate attempt to bury the two-state solution. We strongly condemn this action, which constitutes a clear violation of international law, including Security Council resolutions. The combined effect of mass killing, displacement, famine, settlements, and destruction of habitable land leaves no ambiguity. This is a campaign of ethnic cleansing in plain sight. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, at its 21st extraordinary session of the Council of Foreign Ministers on 25th August, adopted a resolution that speaks with moral clarity. It has urged this Council to act promptly under Chapter 7 to stop the brutal aggression by the Israeli occupation and its violations, which threaten the prospects for achieving a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace in the region and hinder the implementation of the two-state solution. It has also urged the Council to hold Israel, the occupying power, accountable for all crimes and violations that clearly breach international law and international humanitarian law. The Security Council cannot remain a bystander. It must act now, with resolve, to fulfill its charter responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. It must demand, first, an immediate, permanent, and unconditional ceasefire across Gaza and the occupied Palestinian territory, with full implementation of Security Council Resolution 2735. We appreciate and support the efforts led by the United States, Egypt, and Qatar, and hope these will result in an early ceasefire. Second, an immediate and unconditional lifting of all restrictions on the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza and its safe and unhindered distribution to the population in need of such assistance, as well as the restoration of all essential services. Third, release of all hostages and exchange of Palestinian prisoners. Fourth, a halt to Israel's declared intent to occupy Gaza City. And fifth, an end to forced displacement, illegal settlement expansion, and annexations in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Mr. President, lasting peace requires a credible political horizon, one grounded in international law, leading to the realization of a sovereign, viable, and contiguous Palestinian state based on the pre-1967 borders, with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital. Occupation must end, for that is the actual root cause of instability in the Middle East. The high-level conference on peaceful settlement of the Palestinian question and the implementation of the two-state solution was co-chaired by Saudi Arabia and France last month, was a timely initiative. It respects the will of the international community. That must be respected. It must be followed by concrete and coordinated international action to finally achieve the long-coveted peace and stability in the Middle East. Mr. President, every moment of inaction deepens the suffering that we are all here talking about. It multiplies the grief and tears apart the very fabric of international law. The world is watching, History will not forgive delay. It will not forget inaction. The Council must rise to its chartered duty and act. I thank you.